One, two. Umewacha? Hi, James. Hi, James. Hello, how are you managing?
Hi, Dennis. I can hear you. There's
Yes, there's a link. Let me send it to you.
There's an echo.
No. Let alone that. Let me send it.
Yeah, there's it's a bit distorted.
Hi, John. Hi, James.
Hi, very fine.
I hope you are doing fine this afternoon.
I'm doing fine.
Okay. I think your audio is a bit low. Can't hear you well.
Mine?
Yeah, your audio. Okay, now I can hear you well. It's okay. Yeah, fine.
Hello.
Hello. Hi,
Can you
John.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you so well. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're just waiting for George on board, and then from there we'll just do a very brief preview of how it's going to look like, and then we can commence at exactly 2 p.m.
Okay, no problem. Talk to you later.
Okay, sure. Hi, George. You're welcome. Andres, kindly just okay, fine.
Hello, cool. I believe you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you so clearly.
All right, perfect.
Okay, fine. I think we have the three of us on board. Before we commence, just like to give you a brief preview of the order of the day. Yeah, so basically we will commence at exactly 2 p.m. We will start with your presentations in the order. John will just start, and then will be followed by George, and then James. I think I know you're comfortable. You will be able to close in for us in the presentations. So after our presentations, we'll just have a 5-minute period for Q&A, which I only reserve for strictly 2 questions. And then the rest we shall be able to respond in private. And then last but not least, we shall then have a brief session, rather a 45-minute session, where we will then have a free interaction in terms of the questions that we have prepared for you, and then finish with a vote of thanks from one of us at Smart Applications Group. So I invite you to feel comfortable and be ready for the session as well. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Dennis, as far as the presentations are concerned, are you going to project what we shared, or how will it work?
You will just project yourselves. Yeah, sure. Hi, Andreas. Andreas, can you hear me?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Esther.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, how are you? Can you
I'm
see me
very
clearly?
fine. Looking very sharp.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Looking amazing.
We already 8 attendees on.
Yeah, sure.
I can see John, James, and George have already joined in.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi.
Hi, Esther.
Hello. We could have our videos on even as the attendees come in, especially the panelists. Hi, yes, James, now I can see you very clearly. Hello, John. You all look very ready with the wealth of knowledge on this topic you're discussing this afternoon.
Pleasure to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. I know we should be starting in a few. So I know, Dennis, you're our host this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I know we'll be able to start as soon as the clock hits the hour at 2 sharp.
Okay. Sure. Hi, everyone. You're most welcome to this webinar. The topic being the prevailing use cases of artificial intelligence in healthcare. My name is Dennis Kevogo. I'm the Smart Applications Group data scientist. As the Smart family, we would like to cordially welcome you to this webinar. Feel free to post any questions in the chat section. So far, we have 27 participants here on Zoom, and also quite a good number on YouTube Live. Feel free to ask any questions, post them on the Q&A, and we'll be able to respond as soon as we can. So at this juncture, I will just give you a brief introduction to our topic today, which is the prevailing use cases of artificial intelligence in healthcare. So artificial intelligence is helping healthcare organizations to tap into the power of predictive analytics with flexible analytic solutions, which in essence helps hospitals and insurance companies to plug into data through machine learning models in order to derive actionable intelligence for data-driven decision making. So this afternoon, we would like to introduce you into the deep understanding of how AI is playing a leading role in data-driven decision making in healthcare administration, in healthcare facilities, and even in payer and pharmaceutical organizations. Once again, we as the Smart Applications Group family would like to welcome you as we delve into this subject matter of applications of artificial intelligence in healthcare. We will then explore the gaps as well as the caveats and the different opportunities in ensuring that we revolutionize healthcare advancements within this spectrum of artificial intelligence. At this juncture, allow me to introduce our guest of the day. So first and foremost, we have George. George, please kindly wave. George Odera.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi, George. If you may please have your video on.
Sorry, my video connection is off because of connection.
Okay, no problem. So George is one of our panelists, and I'll be a moderator. George is a qualified health and healthcare actuary with a huge appetite for tech, and is currently working on next generation insurance industry solutions for Safaricom. He is a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries. He's a part-time lecturer of actuarial science at Strathmore University and the University of Nairobi. He also has interest in aviation. So George is actually a force in the field of insurance analytics with artificial intelligence. You're most welcome, George.
Thank you.
And to our next guest is also a force within the realm of artificial intelligence. That is none other than John Kamara. John Kamara, if I may have your video on. You're most welcome. So John is a director at Machine Learning Intelligence Institute of Africa, which is based in South Africa. He is also a founder of Afya Record. He's the director for strategy at the Data Driven Innovation Center under CREATES. John is also an entrepreneur at Adlabs Africa. He's also a knight with the Order of Arts and Technologies at Crypto Chain University. John is surely an authority in the artificial intelligence vertical, especially in Africa. You're most welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Sure. And to our third panelist, we will have James Kimani. Hi, James. So James is currently a control and automation specialist at Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, and he's an alumnus of the African Leadership University, data science. He also has a BSc in mechatronic engineering from JKUAT, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. He also has a wealth of transferable skills in robotic process automation for profit optimization and operational efficiency. You're most welcome, James Kimani. So at this juncture, I think we would like to start. But before we start, I would like to welcome Sarah Waithera. I don't know if Sarah Waithera is already up here, the panelist.
Not yet, Dennis.
Not yet. Okay, fine. So I believe we will just proceed. Then once she's on board, Sarah will be able to display so far how smart we've reached in terms of harnessing the power of data analytics in transforming the healthcare realm. So at this particular juncture, allow me to then welcome John Kamara, whom I've already introduced, to begin on his presentation. He will have 15 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes time for question and answer. You're most welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are you sharing the presentation or should I share my screen?
Please proceed.
Okay, let me try to share my screen.
Okay.
So yes, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. As Dennis said, basically being involved in machine learning from the very early days and AI. So what I'm going to talk today about in real quick 15 minutes is really to find a clear, some sort of a clear understanding of where AI sits and also where it sits in healthcare. So in 15 minutes, I will try to sort of show the journey in where I think we should look at AI. And the first thing we want to look at is from a healthcare perspective to really first understand, when we talk about AI, what is the vision for AI in Africa? And our basis for this conversation today is really looking at the African ecosystem. And one of the things that we realize in Africa is the fact that because of, in healthcare, we suffer from 3 key problems. One is a lack of infrastructure. And that means infrastructure, hospitals, maternity clinics, all those things that make it possible for people to consistently access treatment all the time. And the lack of infrastructure is a big problem, and which governments, organizations are solving. But because Africa is extremely rural as well in a number of areas, even planting an infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that you solve the problem, because there's so many other things that you have to worry about in solving the infrastructure issue. But the second part is the limited resources. Now, if you go into limited resources, then you begin to understand that as you train these experts, nurses, doctors, if they get more money somewhere else, they will leave. It's the part of life. Then the data then becomes a problem that has so many different tentacles that we can look at when we start analyzing, AI in healthcare. And if you look at, AI is a key driver to change the goal of the New World Order, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And if we understand where AI sits, but without AI takes its root cause from data, it takes its root value from data. And that is really one of the things that we want to address when we really start looking at AI, in healthcare. How do we, first of all, understand how can AI help in healthcare? The philosophy around, AI being a tool that allows us to leapfrog generations of opportunities or generations into the future, it's accurate, but also extremely inaccurate, because without understanding where data plays in this microeconomy of scale within, as we use AI as a value to change the narrative and to change the tangible deliverables, then it becomes extremely impossible to really harness the power of AI. So how can AI help in healthcare? There's a number of things AI can do, and which we'll deep dive a little bit in the next slide. And I kept it very simple to 2 very simple slides. And if you go into the second question that we ask here is, do you need basic AI solutions, or do we need to build self-learning machine? And a number of people over the past number of months have asked me, what is the difference between artificial intelligence, machine learning, self-learning machine, or a number of all these different other types of solutions? And the answer is always, it all starts from data. Without data, there is no machine learning. Without data, there is no quantum machine learning. There is no, understanding neural networks. We need to understand the value of data, and how that data is collected becomes the baseline for everything that we look at doing in AI. Because most health infrastructures, most health opportunities, and the value to go from step 0 to step 1 in leapfrogging, where we are to where we could be, starts from actually understanding the right of data, the accessibility of data, the mobility of data, and the sovereign right of ownership of data. And once we understand all these values put into one, and also the governance of data, especially in healthcare, then we can begin to say, okay, where does AI, who should do what using AI? And how do we help, the limited resources we have to begin to harness the power of AI to deliver better service? And the importance of the right data sets cannot be overemphasized, because without the right data sets, again, your algorithms and your variable tools, or even if you run clusters in disease modeling with using k-means and a number of other types of tools, still turns back what we call false positives, because you do not have the right set of data. And this is the biggest problem, though, the biggest challenge we face is really understanding data, first of all, and then data for AI, and then how that translates into tangible outcomes. And you see, like I've said, one of the biggest challenges to making effective use of AI in healthcare is data. So because data at the minute remains uncollected properly, it is soiled and it stays in silos. And how do we address this problem? If you think about healthcare, and you think about the fact that when you look at across the board, from the dispensary level 1 clinic all the way to the level 6 or level 5 facility in public health, and then you go into private health where you have the basic private doctor's practice, all the way to the big hospitals, to the chain of hospitals, to the chain of healthcare institutions, it's either that the data based on the solutions we have right now, it remains collected in very fragmented ways, or it is siloed. And the idea of data being in siloed means it becomes extremely difficult for it to be used to address the value of machine learning or AI. And also because there is very little visibility of that data and the use case for that data to actually allow you to develop, multiple variables in real time that aid you to make, to create specific predictions, or to actually make tangible results based on understanding the data set that lead to that. Even when you create machine learning tools, or when you create variable models to say, what does Ebola and diabetes look like? But what does Ebola and diabetes look like means, what do the symptoms look like? What are the metamorphoses of those symptoms? How are those symptoms reflected in the different types of patients? And what the mirage of those symptoms look like together? Now, if you don't collect the right set of data, there's extremely no way you can understand that. And this is where we come to the challenge, which is structured and unstructured data. Now, structured data is the data you collect at, recognized, appointed facilities. So even your dispensary clinic in level 1 is also a source of structured data, because when I go to the hospital, I will tell the doctor for sure what is wrong with me, even when I go to the pharmacist, because I want to give him the information so he can help make an informed decision about how he can treat me. So if I can collect the structured data from that level, if I go to my private doctor's practice, I will tell him. Now, if everybody can collect structured data across every level of infrastructure, now you can begin to understand the size of the structured data that we can actually use to implement basic machine learning, basic AI. We're not even talking about, self-driven machine learning tools. Let's just stay with just basic AI, how to do models around prediction, how to do models around diseases, how to do models around geopopulations and geolocations, how to create models around prevalences of diseases based on different types of individuals, how to segment individuals and create models around how can we actually help, how to look at models around, drugs and disease type, how those two things interrelate to specific type of genomes, specific type of DNAs of people based on the population demography, and also based on the geolocation of that population. So this is some of the things that we can basically sort of begin to think about and begin to understand what the value of that data looks like when we begin to analyze machine learning. And if we then go in, my philosophy is, as I said, the lack of infrastructure, the limited resource, the fraud that happens within healthcare, data becomes the answer for AI in healthcare. So you don't just jump into AI I mean, what is the premise for AI? You know, where is the valuable data? Where is the data that speaks to the fact that we can actually, you know, understand accuracy of information to make informed decision, even for the machine learning tool to say, yes, it can actually give you the right variables. You know, the power of machine learning is basically saying that I can run a model based on scan, multiple amounts of scans in real time, and it gives me 15 to 30 different variables of how I should look at a patient. But that could probably take me 6 months to do, and I'd have to consult so many other different doctors. That is the power of machine learning. That is the power of AI at a high level. At a low level, at a dispensary hospital, based on accuracy of data, I can understand the prevalence of malaria in women who are under 25, who have a certain type of infection in a particular location, who take this type of drugs. Now I can look at the different models around those type of people, and I can see what that infection rate looks like, because every disease that you look about is structured by symptoms. Symptoms are like keywords. And it's basic data. If you collect the symptoms, if you understand the symptoms, if you understand the location, if you understand the prevalence, you will begin to understand basic AI, and you will begin to apply very basic AI into healthcare. And that is kind of where this, so the conversation around AI, which I have had at the ITU, and you don't jump into AI. Let us first examine the data sets that we have. Let us examine how we collect the data. Let us examine what we do with unstructured data. The amount of unstructured data that is collected already, the next slide I will show you, it is humongous. And that data itself speaks to the solution of the problem that we actually face it. And if we go into the next slide, you then begin to understand where I'm coming from. Now, the healthcare industry will produce over 2.3 trillion gigabytes of non-structured data in 2020 alone. You must take a second to understand what that means. 2.3 trillion gigabytes of data, and this is non-structured data. And that non-structured data is coming both from health facilities, from the individuals, from research. It is all coming. And all that data, could actually lower the cost and improve outcomes and manage increased complexities if that data is collected properly. Because without the structure to collect the data properly, the non-structured data will consistently be unreadable, and also or consistently become more expensive for you to actually use any form of AI to create value. And this is some of the things that even as we look at Kenya, and there's no difference between Kenya and most other African countries, is the fact that the siloed nature of data, the fact that we don't collect proper structure of data, because data is like oxygen. This is data. I am consistently creating it. But if someone collected it now, someone else listened to it, someone else analyzed it, someone else used it to analyze other sets of information, they might actually learn something, and they might actually be able to use it to do something. And they can use this set of data that I am creating to create a very simple machine learning algorithm around, conversational AI. This is just an example. Data is everywhere. And the moment that we understand the value of data is everywhere, then we will begin to pay a lot more attention to how do we collect this data and the convergence of data in a decentralized ecosystem. So, the key things that need to happen for this, for us to achieve lowering the cost of data, improving the outcomes of results, managing complexities, one, we must collect structured data at all levels. We must use data as a currency for improved healthcare. And we must have access to that data in real time, every level of healthcare. And lastly, obviously because of time, we then look at the value of AI. What are the benefits of AI in healthcare? One is earlier detection of diseases through innovations like faster, more accurate translations of mammograms and other diagnostic imaging. Have you gone to a hospital where you've done your scan and you've done one scan, and one doctor tells you it takes forever for them to tell you what that scan means, and they have to go and get another response from another, then you have to take it to another doctor. But with AI, you're able to look at this information in real time, and you can help with multiple variables of what that information means to help them come to a quicker outcome by translating that information in real time, because it's been trained. And that is, I mean, the power of that. You've got people with cancer, people with tumors. I mean, you can go on and on about what that could do for chronic illnesses. Then you have the better coordination of treatment plans among clinicians, pharmacies, patients, and others with the help of AI platforms that gather data. Now, if you have, which is what I was speaking to, structured data across a system from level 1, and then I get referred to the main hospital in level 5, and there's very basic AI because my data is being collected at that level 1 all the way to the referral hospital, and the basic AI models allow for the doctor there to then understand the data first, and then be able to do very simple machine learning AI models to say, okay, system, tell me a little bit about what the prevalence of this patient's illness is like based on the drugs they've taken and where they're coming from and the treatment that they've received. And throw me 4, 5, 6, 7 different variables that are taking me 6 months to figure out, rather than doing trial and error. Now you're helping the doctor provide better healthcare in real time for that patient. And the system is consistently learning. The AI models is learning a lot better. Then you got, AI powered training for clinicians in form of realistic simulations and natural language interactions, or even natural language processing. So again, you can use this form of, data collected and AI powered training models to train remotely health workers, to cluster them. I mean, look at Corona has happened. We've got health workers who are in the villages and who are in rural communities. We talk about social distance. How are you going to bring them together? Well, with very basic models of AI, you can actually train these people, simulate real events for them, and actually understand the natural language that they need to reaction in terms of how they actually provide rural healthcare for people in those villages without having to travel all the way to the main city center, but still understand cluster algorithms of how these people have learned and what they need to learn better. Then you go down to, predicting risk status and progression by deepening the understanding of the impact of illness on given populations, along with the cost of various models of care. Now, see, the understanding of population geolocation is a huge part of understanding movement and morph of diseases. And AI, at the huge amount of data you have to collect. I mean, as a human being, it does not matter how smart you are, it will take you months and years to understand this population symmetry, and around how you understand using population symmetry to understand geolocation and symptoms and recreation and metamorphosis of symptoms to actually begin to predict risk status, real risk status and progression analysis by understanding how that has affected the change. So again, you can go from 0 to 50. And the idea of AI is not necessarily taking the power away from the doctor. No. It's not taking the power away from the institution. No, that's not it. The idea of AI is how can you, using this set of data, using this very simple or sometimes more complex machine learning, understanding algorithms, self-learning machine tools, to get from point A to point A quicker so that you can now make the final decision. Decision-making processes, takes over 37% of time of doctors on any given day. What will I prescribe for this person? Now I need to go back and read all this documentation. Now I've got to go back and consult a book. Maybe I should ask my other colleague. Maybe I should get a second, again, because doctors are consistently, or healthcare providers, at the forefront of risk. So AI then says, well, I was reading in California recently about medical an operation, but because using very AI models based on data sets that had existed of different types of skill set that was used for that particular operation, the medical team in less than 6 hours were able to gather 200 different variables And of those 200 different variables, they were able to narrow down to 4. And eventually, then they made the final decision to say, this is the path that we will go. Now, it would have taken them 18 months to do that, because they would have had to go, study, tell the patient to go back again and talk to other partners. So again, you can understand. And when you then talk about insurance and all this, I mean, AI already provides insurance companies a whole different set of values to actually manage the issue of fraud in real time, to also manage the issue of precision and dynamic pricing. Even when you talk about dynamic premium to customers and then how you reduce healthcare value. So this is some of the things that, you know, in my view, AI provides the opportunity for us to leapfrog the rest of the world, because, you know, we are not bogged down with so many governance and policy issues. Implementing AI across all levels, but before we implement the AI models, understand how we collect data, how we structure data, how we make data accessible, and then how we lay a very basic forms of AI to achieve 1, 2, 3 sets of things. Then we can open the world of the real machine learning to everybody else. And then you talk about research in managing patients with chronic illnesses. I mean, I can go on about that, but because of the limited amount of time, I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. This was very in-depth and very relevant to our topic of the day. And like I've told you, John is a force in the realm of artificial intelligence. At this juncture, I have a 5 minutes gap just to invite any questions. But before I move so far, we already had a question on exactly what artificial intelligence is. I'd like to invite John to give a very high-level understanding of artificial intelligence before we continue, because I know we have a mixture of audience.
So artificial intelligence is very basically taking sets of data, building very basic algorithms to understand those sets of data very quickly, and providing you real-time tangible results that would have taken you a long time to do in layman's terms. That is probably the best way to explain it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any other question to John? Please feel free to post on the Q&A. I'll be able to post the same to him as soon as possible. So there's a question by Remy. Okay, there's a question by Jen Mwangi. Is paper recording versus computer recording causing a setback?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Is paper recording versus computer recording causing a setback?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way you can implement AI if we're still documenting information on paper. Then we must, first of all, deal with the problem of data. I mean, without data, there is no artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you for that. We also have another question. In terms of an understanding of artificial intelligence in Kenya, most people think of chatbots on websites. Is there more to AI in our country?
I mean, chatbots are very basic algorithms, but conversational AI is a whole different thing from chatbots. And to build a conversational AI, you have to build it from a position of data, where, you know, I can go into a company like Safaricom and I gather the multiple gigabytes of data that they have and use that to build a conversational tool that becomes self-learning. So, but a chatbot is something that I can just put together and say, if Dennis says X, you should say Y to him. So that's really very, very basic stuff. Then conversational AI, that's where we really have AI in conversation, where you build an avatar that it's as intelligent as you are and can actually, you know, deal with complex questions.
Okay, thank you so much. One last question before we then proceed. AI is a very wide field. Can John please elaborate on the various AI models for data collection, since it's eminent that data is a driving force in artificial intelligence?
For data collection?
Yes.
I mean, first of all, you don't necessarily, I mean, you can use image-based AI for data collection, If you build image-based tool that allows you for recognition of information in real time, and then to be able to create sets of those information that are placed within a platform. But I don't necessarily think that we should focus too much in trying to get AI for data collection. Rather, we should put very basic tools that allows us to collect data, or platforms that are intelligent enough that allows you to collect data properly. It's kind of like putting the cart before the wheel. So you're saying, well, let me build an AI tool to collect data. No, you should build a platform to collect data. Then when you collect the data, then okay, in this same platform I'm building, while I'm building it, can I build some AI models to do X, Y, Z? And this has been the problem, when people take smart technology and say, let me build a great blockchain tool to do what? Let me build a great AI tool to do what? First, let me build a tool to collect data. Then, while I'm building that tool, let me build a machine intelligence into that tool that as it's collecting the data, this is what I'd like it to do.
Okay. Then lastly, it's a question on COVID-19, which I'd also stress on the same. COVID-19 is actually an uncertainty, and it's imminent that we may not know when it's likely to end, especially in Africa. Where is AI in all this in terms of predicting when the likelihood of ending? Yeah, sure.
So one of the things we're doing right now, we should be live with Afia Record in Mombasa, because we build what we call a disease management platform. It's not really COVID-19. COVID-19 is just another disease. And the idea is to use symptoms, which is keywords, and geolocation. Because for you to actually sequence any disease, you must always sequence the symptoms, not the human. The human is a secondary party. And I think, and to sequence symptoms, you need to collect data. Again, it goes back to the first question, how are we collecting the data around COVID-19? I can give you a few examples already where you do COVID test and it's written on pen and paper. Already we're losing the value of AI on day one. So when you look at how does AI play, AI cannot do much except we collect the data in the right way. And I will tell you this for free every day of the week. There's nothing, but if you collect the data the right way, you can use AI to understand the movement of the symptoms, the metamorphosis of the symptoms, how the symptoms becomes dynamic to different types of patients, and how the symptom actually flows, and how we actually react to different types of medications, and how some people are actually building antibodies to match your symptoms. So now you can begin to do so many more interesting things to actually manage the disease. But you can't do any of that until the data is stopped being written on pen and paper.
Thank you so much, John. That was an amazing presentation and response. So we'd like then to move to our next guest. But before that, I would like to welcome Sarah Waithera, who is the head of Electronic Data Solutions at Smart Applications Group. We would like her to just, in a high-level way, showcase how so far Smart Applications Group has been able to harness the power of artificial intelligence in order to ensure that we solve problems within healthcare. You're most welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Dennis, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to have this audience, and the panelists are very strong panelists. Thank you very much. We really appreciate for you making the time. Now, it's more on, as it has been emphasized, data collection is the primary for AI. And so SMART being central of healthcare data collection, especially in the private sector, in this segment, I was just mentioning some outputs that we gathered, and especially during this COVID pandemic period, that can easily predict the behavior and the effect it has had in the healthcare industry, and especially with patients. So as you can see, and I hope everyone can see my screen, it came out that definitely the traffic across the months when it comes to patient visits dropped in the month of March and dropped drastically in the month of April for both for outpatients especially, and picked up a little bit in May and picked up a little bit more in June. And the difference, as you can see, the difference month on month, it was quite substantial. Difference between March and April, where it dropped with a 43%. And at that time, and I would speak only for Kenya, knowing that probably the participants here are representing different countries, I'd speak for Kenya, where we had a lockdown announced in March. And so this type of output of results of data shows us the behavior of the country, where probably the healthcare in the remote areas is not very good. And so most people do come to the city, Nairobi, to access healthcare. And so with the lockdown, that drastic drop of traffic showcased this behavior as a nation. And so such information and such output of data can help guide both the healthcare sector, the regulatory bodies, the Ministry of Health. How can they improve healthcare facilities in the remote areas? And so this is what you get. And especially if the data collection is accurate, and if the data collection is on platforms that are AI, then definitely the output of the data can be quick, much fast, and beneficial. And we saw that average of cost was ranging the same throughout the months at 4,000. But the overall drop of traffic between January and the month of June was at 30%. And so we can all see the effect of the pandemic, especially for the country of Kenya. Out of the data also at a very macro level, we could see the difference between the two quarters. And in Kenya, the 2 quarters was before the lockdown, and during the lockdown, that was the Q1 and Q2. And quite substantial information where it showed that within the Q1, acute upper respiratory was top. And in Q2, gastritis took the top position. And so such information, and I'm not a clinician, but I can just from the basic knowledge that I have, it could be due to stress, it could be due to use of painkillers, because at that time and during the lockdown, most people self-medicated themselves and could not access medical facilities. And the environment and the condition was quite stressful. And so gastritis is a result of those kind of conditions, use of self-medication, stress, the type of dietary you're taking. All that change brought the gastritis top in Q2. And also we saw that gastroesophageal reflux, which appeared in Q2, has never been there in Q1. And we went back and saw even in 2019, gastroesophageal reflux had not been there on top 20 diagnosis. And so for it to appear top 20 in Q2 basically brings out the behavioral change that came about the pandemic, way of eating, lack of movement, and all this resulted to that condition. So basically, my segment was quite short, just to showcase at a very macro level what data can bring out and advise the healthcare industry. As you can see in Q2 as well, you can see pneumonia moved 3 places up. You can see hypertension also moved 3 places up. And so all these conditions that are related to COVID took top place. Thank you very much. Unless there are any questions, I'd like to hand over to the panel.
Sure. I think I have just a question for you. If you may respond, then we can proceed. What would you attribute to the high average cost in the month of June compared to January and February for both inpatient and outpatient?
In the month of June, sorry?
In the high average cost in the month of June compared to January and February.
Okay, when we are doing the average cost, it's against the number of patients. And so when the number of patients has gone down, yet the cost remains the same, definitely the average, the computation will definitely take the average a little bit higher.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't say necessarily that the healthcare facilities hiked their prices, no.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was amazing.
Thank you too.
You're most welcome. Allow me then to move to our next speaker. That is none other than George Odera. George, you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Just a minute, and then you can be able to share your screen. So George is a manager of insurance at Safaricom, and he has high stakes within the space of artificial intelligence. Okay, welcome.
Dennis, there are two people who've raised their hands before we proceed.
Okay, thank you. I think I wasn't able to see that. Kindly just post the questions. I'll be able to respond. Susanna, we will be able to respond the same in private. That was a question to John. I'll just respond the same via mail. You can proceed.
Okay, thanks. My presentation will steer towards some of the use cases around artificial intelligence, and we'll be looking at some of the drivers around it as well. So I'd like to start off the afternoon with two quotes for the day. One, you cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. So I know AI is something new, and potentially all organizations, so whether you're looking at the healthcare or non-healthcare sectors, have harnessed a lot of data in the past, and this is a new field which could be quite beneficial to them, but it will only be of benefit to any organization if we actually go outside of our norms and embrace this as a new technology. And the second quote is really, there's nothing new under the sun. So whatever we are discussing today has existed all these years in different forms. It's only that we are trying to bring it out in a different manner. So my presentation is twofold. One, just touching on cognitive systems, because this is the driving block for AI. Then two, just do a deep dive into some of the practical use cases of AI in health and care. And I've purposely picked some illustrations that you can easily relate to and see how AI can come into play in the health and care space. So starting off with cognitive systems. Now, whether you want to call it machine learning, I know guys use AI interchangeably with machine learning. What a cognitive system is, it's I will say the new era of programming. So I know some of you, depending on your age, might have come across typewriters, yeah, back in the days. Which was just gave people the functionality to type. You could count and track data. Then after that moved the computer era, the programmable era space, which has been in existence for quite some time. And the new era in terms of computing intelligence where we are moving towards is the cognitive systems era. Now, what a cognitive system is, think of it just like a smart computer that is able to use natural language and machine learning to interact with the human being. Yeah. And this new era of computing is going to definitely change how data is processed. We are increasingly producing large amounts of data. And it's estimated that even from the year 2000 to date, we've probably produced more data than has ever been produced in the whole of humanity. And if you doubt that, you can just think about the different traces of your personal data that you leave. So from your healthcare records, to your social media records, to your email streams, to your work-related mails, then you'll get to understand the volume of data that is being produced and that can actually be harnessed. Now, how cognitive systems work, it's based on three underlying principles. The first thing is that just like yourself, they are able to learn and understand. And the learning can either be through natural language or it can be a written word, so vocal or visual. So for instance, a cognitive system, if it's visual based, can be able to look at an item and be able to decipher information from it. Or it could also be vocal based, where it's able to hear words that are spoken and translate that into data. Now, after the understanding bit, there's the reasoning element. And think of how you developed advanced math skills as you went through your primary, high school, university, for those who took math-related courses all through to university. Now, the reasoning gets better as you progress through the higher learnings. And the same principle applies for cognitive systems. So they're able to reason on their own based on the initial data that were fed into them. And their reasoning becomes better and better over time. The third block or element is learning. So it's continuous. So it's not that it's going to, the cognitive systems are going to learn something and it becomes static. Learning is a continuous process for them. So as and when you feed more data, as and when the experience becomes different, the cognitive systems are going to increasingly learn around the data and the new features around it. So it has been emphasized that data is really crucial. So it does not matter what sort of smart system you come up with. If the data is going to be still unstructured, if it's going to be in written form, it needs to be put into a format that the system can actually utilize and harness. So how you actually capture your data, store your data, and actually feed it is really crucial. And I think this has been emphasized, and I couldn't emphasize it enough. Yeah. So there are sensors, which, like I've said, could either be visual or vocal. They read off the data, feed it to the cognitive systems. Then it performs certain analysis. That analysis translates into information, and that information subsequently translates into knowledge. So that's sort of the flow and the hierarchy in terms of how data goes into the cognitive systems and how they're actually used to form different inferences. Now, this is not specific to healthcare as a sector, but the same process can be used in virtually any other sector. And I'll probably just want to give a few illustrations which you can even relate to without before we look at the healthcare related use cases. So for instance, have you ever gone to a networking event, then you swap phone numbers, save it on your phone book, Then the next time you log in on LinkedIn, you find that LinkedIn has already recommended a connection to you without you actually searching the name. Or if you go on your social media sites, you actually see the social media site is actually recommending you that person to be someone whom you probably want to add within your networks. And that's just by virtue of you allowing these particular apps to access your phone records. So at times when you download all these numerous apps from the Play Store or App Store, you consent to them accessing your personal data without you knowing. And now if you scale up that volume of data across the different apps, you get to realize how much of your personal data and information you are actually exposing to these different service providers. So I now want us to look at the practical use cases of AI. And like I mentioned, I have intentionally chosen a couple of examples which I believe you'll be able to relate to. So the first thing is preventive healthcare. So all of us want to enjoy good health, and there are, I would say, 3 states in life. You're either healthy, sick, or dead. Yeah, and of course, if you are dead, that's what we call an absorbing state. For Christians, we tend to believe there is life after death. We'll get to find out when that event actually happens. But on the life state, you'll get to realize that there is the disease burden when you actually get to have an active disease is quite large. So I would say there's approximately 20% of the people in the population who are actively sick end up generating 80% of the costs associated with the burden on the healthcare system. Now, before you actually get sick, you'll find that you are going to pass through the healthy state or the low risk state. Then you're going to be at a state which I call at risk. So there is a chance that you'll actually fall sick rather. Then you'll get to a high risk stage. Then the next stage is where there are going to be some early clinical symptoms that are going to manifest themselves before you get into an active disease. Now, based on data that can be collected and analyzed, it's quite probable that before a patient gets to the active disease state, there are certain proactive intervention measures that can be put in place when you're still at the at-risk stage, high risk, or when you actually have early clinical symptoms. Now, what happens is most people tend to only go to hospital when they're in the late stages of the early clinical symptoms. But if you're able to detect that quite early enough, then it means that whatever you're going to spend treating this particular person before the disease becomes full-blown is going to be significantly less. And also from a patient perspective, you'll have been able to arrest a disease before it actually manifests itself quite strongly in a patient, which could also be potentially fatal. Now, a perfect example how that can be managed is through physical activity trackers. Now, I know there are different forms of such trackers in the market, which costs anything between 1,000 shillings all the way to 10,000 shillings. But these trackers actually do collect personally identifiable information that can help healthcare providers actually monitor a patient's health profile over time. Now, what this means is that the management of a patient is actually dynamic. So ideally, we won't wait till you get to the active disease stage before we actually take certain intervention measures based on the metrics which the device throws off from you as an individual. We can be able to proactively take certain intervention measures. Now, non-communicable diseases account for about 63% of annual deaths, and these are highly preventable diseases which can be picked out based on your metrics. So we are talking about cardiovascular, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, and diabetes. So these are technically lifestyle-related diseases which could easily be prevented. Now, what some of the metrics which these devices can pick out are, say, the level and type of activity as well as the intensity. So are you walking, are you running? It can take real-time data on your pulse rate, your body temperature, your blood pressure. It can be able to detect stress levels. Yeah, and certain triggers can actually be sent out based on this information. So you could be out there walking, you're probably not aware that you have high stress levels or you have high blood pressure. And by the high blood pressure is one of the medical conditions that is known as a silent killer for most people. Or whether, say, you don't have sufficient sleep, which could also trigger certain chemicals in your body. And also any exposure to harmful chemicals, for instance, carcinogenic chemicals. So all these metrics can actually be proactively obtained, and you can receive triggers to actually enable you manage or mitigate your risk exposure before it gets full blown and you actually get an active disease. Second thing is patient interaction and management. And some of these items are actually out there as we speak. So for instance, we have chatbots and preliminary diagnosis or triage. So a lot of these apps are actually out there, and how they work is that based on the symptoms which you have, you basically feed in those symptoms to the app, and they're able to give you a couple of probable diseases which you might be having. So it's a good thing to have. However, I need to emphasize that it does not replace the expertise by the medical profession. So you can also have automated diagnosis. So patient data can be fed in through a machine, then it gives an automated diagnosis. You can have virtual nursing assistants to attend to patients, say, especially those in critical care. Then dosage calculator. So the interesting thing around dosage calculator is for the longest time, whenever you have an ailment, doctors often prescribed a standard dosage. So say if it's antibiotics, you'll be told to take one dose 3 times a day for 7 days. And it was based on the standard experience in the population. However, what AI could enable you to do via dosage calculator is that depending on the severity of your ailment, it could actually recommend you to take medication, say for 5 days instead of 7 days, or actually recommend you to take it for 12 days instead of the standard 7. Second thing that is out there are bionic limbs. So these are a replacement for prosthetic limbs. And these bionic limbs...
Just allow me to interrupt you. You could be winding up.
Yes, sure. Okay. So the bionic limbs are fitted with cameras that can detect objects, and this is the new generation. This is a new generation mobility device for people who need replacement limbs. Then there's 3D organ modeling. So before you actually go in for surgery, doctors can be able to get a 3D model of the organ which needs an incision. Then they'll be able to actually do the surgery with lesser point precision. The last thing is on personalized evidence-based medicine. So right now, from the time you're probably born to the time you get to old age, you have so much medical data, but it's probably in different medical providers and not necessarily in electronic format. Now, I think I already emphasized the issue of data. Now, if data can be in an electronic medical format, what it will do is that it's going to enable clinicians to be able to see, based on the symptoms which you exhibit, they can be able to search years worth of records of medical data based on different demographics, diagnoses, procedures, and they can be able to recommend the best medical treatment for yourself. So perfect example is an AI computer called IBM Watson. So it enabled cancer doctors to use evidence-based options to actually analyze the cancer records across the different years and recommend the best course of treatment for patients. So in summary, those are some of the high-level use cases which can be used. And my emphasis is around having data in a format that can actually be used by these systems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, George. That was a wonderful presentation. I think I'll just take 2 questions quickly and then we can proceed. There's a question by someone that what does AI mean for the skill requirements of health professionals? Did you get it?
So you said, what does AI mean for a skill requirement? I didn't get the last point.
Of health professionals. I think.
Okay, maybe just I don't think the question is quite clear. I'll try and answer it based on what I perceive is being asked. So, what does AI mean for a skilled professional? Now, remember, what AI, the intention of AI is just to help a skilled professional make a better informed decision in a much faster manner. And my closing remarks was an example of the electronic medical records. So the doctor or the clinician will still have the onus as to what course of treatment he or she needs to give a patient. But what AI will enable a clinician to do is to make an informed decision based on historical records on which is the most effective treatment that could be appropriate for this particular patient or a particular patient.
Okay, thank you so much. One last question, and then we can proceed to our last speaker before we move to the panel session. Okay, so there being no other question, thank you so much, George. That was an amazing presentation on DSM. I'd like then to bring on board James Kimani, who is a control and automation specialist from Coca-Cola Beverages. He'll be taking us through AI, more specifically, the power of robotic process automation. You're most welcome, James.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present in this forum. Yeah, so this is an area I'm very passionate about, and I have a background in mechatronic engineering, but I furthered my studies in artificial intelligence, more specifically on machine learning. But yeah, these, like you'll see from the presentation I have, it's something that it's quite cross-platform, and you're able to integrate on so many areas. So, like specifically where I am currently set up is manufacturing plant, and yeah, the soda or drinks you take every day, they somehow end up to you handled by an AI of some form. I'll specifically be focusing on robotic aspects of AI. So I'll also break down, I've seen quite a number of questions, people asking on what is AI. So I'll also break that down, and also you'll see where from the different, more like from the different careers and backgrounds everyone is from, how you'd actually come in. So just maybe from an overview, the general And most of the time, maybe the definition that most people know is what we've seen on or what Hollywood has given us as AI. And we see, maybe for the old folks, you remember RoboCop, but and we've seen the likes of Transformers and all. But basically, the whole point of AI is bringing intelligence, which is now mostly seen in human beings, and combining that with artificial beings, or more of machines. And the interesting thing there is they're in various forms, not necessarily a robot like we've seen, maybe what a robot with a face like what Hollywood will try and present to us. You'll see that like in industry, the robots are in various forms. They could be SCADA systems, could be SCADA systems, or just a machine that is more like automating a process. Back to this, or like the previous presenters have shown, AI is not a new concept. It's actually a concept that's been researched on for quite a long time. It's only that now with Moore's law, with advancements in processing power and better, more processing power, better equipment, we are now able to do a lot more complex things. So this, like among the pioneers of AI research was John McCarthy, and in a conference in 1955, he defined, this was the definition he gave for AI. And like the previous presenters have shown, one of the key things in AI is the data. So you have to make sure you have as much data as possible. And what I've bolded out here is you can be able to make a machine do what, or to look like an intelligent being by precisely describing every task. And when you precisely describe that task, you'll be able, you do that with data that you're able to gather. So like the various examples we've seen, you have to give it as much data as possible until it knows what the different scenarios look like. And from that, it's able to even make predictions from that. Maybe I think George has given some good examples on this, but I'd just like to emphasize like on the generalized learning. So for when we come, or when we are now going into artificial intelligence, we now don't do the conventional programming that maybe I'd say now call it old school way of programming. We make a machine that is actually able to we make a machine that's actually able to interpret, or you'll actually teach it, and then after you have taught it a specific thing, it's actually able to learn as well. There are a lot of complex algorithms on this, and yeah, so but I'll just show some examples on that. So yeah, just to maybe demystify AI, for those who are asking about AI, AI is more of a general concept, and within it is a number of areas of specialization, where like in my case is in robotics. So I've specialized in robotics, and now with there's also machine learning. All of these are they're very deep concepts in AI, and that are they all focus on data that eventually form this artificial intelligence that you're able to look at, and at some point, or in a very advanced stage, sometimes you can't even tell the difference, or it's hard to tell like if it's really a human being in the background or it's a machine. Most of these other fields here we have actually used sometimes maybe without even knowing, like with natural language processing. Most people have used Siri, Alexa, and the Google Assistant. So this all this add up to one. But maybe specifically what we'll be looking at is now on expert systems. It's a very interesting area where you now combine maybe the likes of machine learning, but now the data or knowledge you feed to this system is all from a specific field. So you'll end up with a machine or an artificial intelligence tool that is very powerful in a specific field and can be very informative, and sometimes or most of the times actually outperforming people in the professionals in the same field. So you'll see some examples of that. in maybe more like in industry, or my current setup here is we use different kind of automation systems or robotic automation systems. So these are more of tools, and they usually help us in making, or more like making tasks that we'll consider difficult much more easier, and also more like automating a lot of processes that in the past we had to take a very took a lot of time to do, or took very many people to do. So for instance, like what you're seeing on the top right is an example of robotic arms that are used in welding. So they'll help in welding a car, and they'll do it very precisely every time. Back in the past, you'd have maybe people who would do this manually, but with robotic systems, you're actually able to fully automate these, have very precise welds, very reliable welds every time, no defects. So they're always perfect. There are very many, like Dennis has mentioned. I use this a lot, and specifically like on energy management systems, predictive maintenance systems, SCADA systems. When you have a very complex plant or setup, you taking advantage of AI systems helps you to have your eye literally on every part. So you're able to collect all the data, you're able to make predictions and precisely not only be able to catch a fault, but be able to predict. And other than that, we even now, like what George was mentioning on cognitive maintenance, we're going long into predicting something that will happen 6 months or 1 year away. Something that was that maybe compared to the old maintenance system is quite revolutionary. So and this helps us on maximizing a lot on making sure that the business is doing very well, and you're able to give the customer everything that they need. So
I may just interrupt. You could be winding up, please.
So maybe like we mentioned, in medical field, there's tons of data. So maybe I just won't go back to that, but there's a lot of data that's been collected in that field. And the way it's being used, I'll just show a few examples. So at the moment, we are having a crisis on the corona situation we have in literally the whole world. And the way robots are being used is like a good example is in delivering food in medical in hospitals. So with this, you're actually able to avoid maybe contamination or spread of the disease. So this is a very easy robot, and you can actually be able to use that. So it's also in sanitizing. So where you'd have, instead of using maybe sanitizer would work, but you will have a robot like the one in the bottom right, where you have it more like going through the whole building, and using UV light, you can actually be able to sanitize a specific room. So yeah. There's also there's a lot of development in areas such as eye and radiography, eye diagnosis, or in optical field, compared to maybe the human counterparts. The level of accuracy, like in when using AI in radiography or in optical field, you have an accuracy of almost 98%, versus the human counterparts, you actually have a machine. Humans or the human counterparts will perform at around 60% or worse, given maybe the country or different backgrounds. But this is actually quite amazing. Some you can even use your mobile phone, and it's able to accurately tell you that. Maybe I think I've seen quite a number of doctors here. They'll tell you misdiagnosis is a very big problem in medical field. So this is actually helping a lot. I've seen this being used in Mozambique, the radiography, and it's really helped a lot to avoid misdiagnosis, or even you could be reading something and you completely don't see something, or maybe like a disease that's cropping up. And with machines, you're actually able to identify this quite early before it happens. And this, like I've said, this is completely outperforming all human beings. So yeah. Also, maybe just to mention, last thing is in surgery, there's actually this is something that's developing a lot. For surgeons, they are professionals who are quite rare in the society, and sometimes getting them around everywhere in the whole world, it's difficult. So how robotics is coming in, we end up having robots that can actually be able to do the surgeries, or you'll use it over the internet, quite literally. So you'll have a surgeon here and a patient probably like in Japan or in another side of the world, and the surgeon is able to do the operations and they're successful. The amazing thing with this is you actually we've had more than 5,000 of these surgeries be done around the world, all that have been successful. So it's quite amazing that this is possible, and this through AI powered robots. Yeah, like also George has mentioned, these are not prosthetics as normal prosthetics as we've had in the past, but these are prosthetics that have chips within them that are actually learn how maybe you walk, and they'll still keep your gait. The interesting thing, like you can actually go research on Hugh has research. He lost his limbs climbing and dedicated his life into doing good research on the same field. These legs actually now outperform human being legs. So it's actually also a scary area we're going to, because you will actually cut off your limbs and get prosthetics, because they'll be better than your human limbs. But you're going to see a lot of this, and yeah. So this just maybe some applications of AI and specifically in robotics in the medical field. There's also a lot, like if you were to centralize all the data that's probably like in hospitals, this is a big challenge, but there's so much benefit that can come from that, like even with predictions, like what John was mentioning, maybe tracing diseases long before they become a very big outbreak. So yeah, but I think maybe based on time we have, I'll just stop it at that. But it's a very deep field, and there's so much that is happening, and that we're able to do even within where we are. I think any other question?
Okay. Can we invite any questions? There's a question from Jeff. Do we see the possibility of a future where robots take over most of the tasks currently executed by humans? AGI.
Yes, we definitely will see a lot of that, because maybe the other point from this is robots are the concept that maybe is there these days is cobots. So robots are supposed to work with humans, and they more like enhance the way their human counterparts or professionals in the various fields perform. So like most of the hospitals we go to, we now have, maybe we don't have a robot with a face like this one here, but we have robots literally everywhere that assists human beings to getting better at what they're actually doing. So, and the interesting thing is we only have like 1% of the robots in application in Africa. So we don't get to see most of them, but that is coming.
Okay, thank you so much. I think one last question. what is the rate of AI penetration in Kenya and Africa in general, and in which fields? I think that is one of the questions that we are going to is going to be responded by one of our panelists. So just kindly be patient. I think we have no more questions on the same. Allow me then to take us to our last session, where we will have questions to our panelists. And the first question then would go to John Kamara. Hi, John. John? Okay, fine. As we just wait on him, I'll post the first question then to George Odera. George, what do you think is the potential of artificial intelligence in healthcare, in the industry in Africa?
Okay, thank you. So if we look at the disease burden around Africa, you'll notice that diseases, ailments that have previously been associated in the West, so mainly non-communicable diseases that I talked about, are increasingly creeping up. So we are becoming less active. We are adopting a more sedentary lifestyle. So I do believe AI, using, say, some of the physical activity trackers that I talked about, will be able to arrest some of these trends and ailments before they actually become full-blown. Then secondly, if we look at Africa as a continent, there are certain diseases which I would say are a bit specific to us or are more pronounced within this continent compared to other countries. So for instance, HIV, AIDS, certain forms of cancer. We have Ebola towards the western part of Africa. And you'll find that we have gathered so much data and records around some of these ailments that are specific to the continent. So I do strongly believe that AI has a role in terms of trying to unearth the underlying causes of some of these ailments, or trying to recommend certain medical treatments that can be quite effective for new infections across the continent.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So the next question will be to James. James, robotic process automation is poised to enhance automation. Of course, we have also profit maximization and generally operational efficiency in hospitals. How would you rate the success of the same, and are there impediments currently?
Yeah, so for this use, basically maybe like in hospital, in the healthcare system, these are more robotic process automation are more of tools that are being used in these fields, and they help a lot to make or increase the accuracy of maybe what professionals in that field, maybe in hospitals, are doing. For instance, like a CT scan. The way it was being done maybe 20 years ago is completely different from the way it's being done now. And the level of detail is so much that you find even the humans are now completely dependent on the modern machines. And that's this robot. So they definitely are going to see a lot more of this being applied literally in not only in healthcare, but in every field we are seeing that's there. The only challenges we have is most of these are using very new technologies, and so maybe I'd say maybe our education system sometimes you'll find it's even for those in the advanced or the developed countries, the education system is training to catch up with the technology that's actually there. That's why you'll even see some of the companies even prefer to hire people who have not even gone through school but are very proficient in those various technologies. So yeah, so education system, there's challenges also maybe with for AICC, maybe like with privacy, like John had mentioned. So it will involve a lot of data collections. So you've seen most of the countries are not even allowing data to move out, or like data centers to be stationed, all data centers to be stationed within their countries. So these are some of just a few of the challenges that are there. But yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful response. Also, George, there's another question for you. What do you think is the primary role of artificial intelligence in achieving universal healthcare?
Thanks. So if you look at the government's objectives for UHC, as it's called in the country, it's focused not just on the treatment, but also on the preventive side. Now, like was presented previously, you could easily understand ailments contributing towards the disease burden in the country. So malaria, you have pneumonia, and actually pneumonia is actually the leading cause of death in the country compared to all other ailments, which you can consider cancer, malaria, etc. I think cancer should be at number 3 currently. Now, a lot of these ailments are actually preventive, and the purpose of UHC is to actually put resources on healthcare interventions which are needed by people the most. So if you can actually prevent these ailments from occurring, so for instance, by understanding weather patterns, by understanding the behavior of people prone to or more at risk, say, of contracting pneumonia based on the geographical location, you can be able to actually relieve the burden of universal healthcare coverage. So I will say the main role is using it on the preventive side of healthcare, but also most importantly in trying to prescribe medicine or healthcare interventions that are most likely to be effective across the population, because the balance which you must always strike in a universal healthcare system is being able to spend money on a healthcare intervention which is going to have the highest impact in the population.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. So as we even continue with the questions, I think, James, there's another question for you that maybe in your opinion, how do you think AI can replace, or do you think AI can actually replace doctors completely in the literal sense?
Well, I think for my opinion is that AI is more of a tool. There are areas where it's completely outperforming people, and you could say it will replace them, but I think I've shared this with some doctors, and there are areas where you need doctors, or you need a human being to actually interpret. So like, for instance, for AI tools, you'll use maybe natural language to collect the data. For a doctor, they'd actually maybe be looking at a face and telling that maybe you can actually tell how much pain someone is in just from their facial expressions, or maybe from their voice. But for a machine, things like intonation and all that may not make sense to them. So yeah, so I still think of them as tools, but not necessarily replacements. But yeah, for incompetent doctors or professionals, they definitely be easily replaced.
Okay, thank you so much. So George, I think there's a question for you once again from the chats that do you think AI is going to augment predictive analytics, which actually is normally tried to employ in the insurance industry? And are there any other applications of AI in insurance?
Yeah, so I strongly believe that AI is going to complement predictive analytics in a large scale. And in terms of the use cases in insurance, if you think about it, there is a whole lot of use cases. So just looking at the product cycle of insurance as it is. So today you find that insurance products are often developed and priced on a global basis. But there's a huge opportunity to actually offer personalized insurance products and solutions to every individual based on circumstances that are actually unique to you. And also when you come to issues of underwriting and claims management, again, you can use AI to automate that process and actually curb fraud, which I think is one of the largest driving factors of losses for the insurance industry. So yes, you're able to verify genuine claims, pay promptly and fast, but also importantly, also able to filter out fraudulent claims within the system.
Okay. Thank you so much. So back to James once more. Where do you think natural language processing fits in healthcare? Maybe you can just demystify very briefly what NLP is first.
So for NLP, NLP stands for natural language processing. The way maybe it's described to all attendees is the same way you use Siri for iPhones or Google Assistants for those using Androids. You'll just talk to a machine and it's actually more like understands what you're saying, and it'll give you an answer that's very accurate most of the time. But so in the way it's going to be used in the healthcare industries, majorly for data collection. So you could easily have, or I think right now they even already apps where you can just talk to them, tell them how you're feeling, and they'll actually collect they'll now just translate that. So from text, from now your voice to translate to text, and then now goes back to run through all the algorithms in the background and actually able to maybe tell you most likely what is there. So other than that, there's also, I think, like in therapy, so where you maybe want some advice. I think even from the very first applications of NLP, that's where it went to, where you could have a bot that you're talking to, and you'd more like find someone that you can talk to and will advise, and you don't maybe feel that you're talking to someone who will you don't feel like your privacy is being infringed. So majorly, I think those areas. So advice or therapy and question data collection.
So thank you so much for that, James. So George, there's another question for you from the participants. That's Evanson. That could you highlight maybe how healthcare has an area of applications of AI dealing with the hindrances to AI penetration, maybe with leaning towards manpower, legal issues, and maybe technical integration?
I'm still trying to understand the question. So use of AI where there are limitations of say human interface or interaction, was that right?
Yeah, with some hindrances that AI has so far in terms of maybe not easing the penetration, but now looking at maybe manpower, legal issues, and technical integration. That's the question. Simply hindrances of artificial intelligence. But, yeah. Did you get it?
Yeah, so I'll answer it based on how I hope I've got the question correctly. So looking at the hindrances, and I think you mentioned the hindrances and the legal issues. To begin with, this thing is really hungry for data. So, and remember, there is an adage, garbage in, garbage out, as far as data that you feed into any system. So for starters, there are restrictions around an individual's data, and this is data privacy laws that are coming in, as to the extent to which you can actually use an individual's personal data without their consent. So for you to do any meaningful analysis, or for the system to actually do anything meaningful with the data you feed it in, one, the consent needs to be there to begin with. So I will say that that's a big limitation in itself as far as data privacy laws. However, provided the patients actually do consent to their data being used, which can be beneficial to them in the long term, then I think that will be probably more of an opportunity than a limitation or a hindrance in itself. I'm still not quite 100% whether I got the question correctly. Probably could just ask Evans to clarify in case that was not the intended response.
Yeah, sure. I think you can be able to just write it on the chats, and I'll be able to respond to the same. That's to Evans. And then again, once more, another question before, and that is, I think this is to James. Do you think, or rather, what are the drawbacks of over-reliance on artificial intelligence?
I've seen Nicolas' question, and it's quite interesting. So the interesting thing that's happening with AI, or the various tools that we are using, are we have a system more like the example he's used there with autonomous driving. If you compare that to human beings, especially like specifically on Tesla, the number of accidents that have happened when it's on when it was on autonomous driving, and then compare that to the number of accidents that still happen or that human beings are involved in. Just to give you an idea, like in Kenya, we have 10,000 people who die from accidents yearly. On a daily basis, even as much as maybe we're talking of Corona, accidents kill more people on a daily basis than Corona. And same thing, like if you look at even US, you have almost 40,000 people who are killed yearly by accidents. So what AI tools need to do is only be better than humans. That's the only thing they need to be. So the same way I've shown with the radiography and maybe for optical applications, the very many misdiagnoses, like for optical applications, human opticians, you find out the level of the research that's being done is you find like a 60% accuracy among the opticians, while for the AI tools that do the same thing has an accuracy of 98. So yeah, we still have a lot of inaccuracies in the systems that already exist. So AI tools are actually way much better and more reliable. At this point, we actually getting to a point where you'll be worried if you go into a human being than using a machine. So like, because if you just check the statistics, going into a taxi versus going into an autonomous taxi, you'd rather go into an autonomous taxi that will not make mistakes. And I think Dennis can concur with me. I've made the joke that we're going into a future where driving might be legal in the future. So, because yeah, it will actually be dangerous for a human being to drive, and it's always, even despite more automotive manufacturers or the likes of cabs in other countries have done, they find that the problem or what causes accidents is not the cars, despite putting all the measures, it's the human being in the car. So with the AI, you eliminate that, and also traffic and also many other things. So yeah, so
Okay.
you see a lot of AI tools everywhere.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think one relatable question again to you, George, is that are there any regulatory requirements and government policies that you think might delay the adoption of AI-based applications in the healthcare industry?
So straight away, the existing regulation which comes to mind is around the data protection. So there's a data protection law that has been enforced, and what it restricts is the liberty around which you can use someone's data. So even if they actually consent to you using the data, they need to further consent to how you can actually use that data. So previously, without data privacy and protection rules, you're pretty much at liberty to collect and use data. So you'll need to be wary of that particular limitation. Then number 2 is also regulations around cyber security. So anyone intending to use AI as a functionality or a service also needs to comply with stringent cyber security laws just to protect the system and also to protect the best interests of the individuals as well as the individual's identity.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful response. I think our participants, so far we are about 82, and like I told you, we have also a following on YouTube Live. I hope you're enjoying the session. I hope it's quite insightful, if not very insightful. And if it's confusing, we hope that you will recover that in the near future. And then the next question I think would cut across both James and George. That what would you say is the risk of maybe cybersecurity risk in artificial intelligence, especially in healthcare? And how can we mitigate against the same?
Maybe I'd comment on that. The same way the one who manufactured or invented the gun made it to maintain peace, and someone else took the same thing and decided to create war with it. So that's the same thing that's happening with the AI. There are those who will use it for good and those who use it for bad. And with cybersecurity, it's one of, I think now countries are more worried of cybersecurity than anything else. An invasion is more, countries are creating or preparing for a cyber war more than a physical war. So as more developments are happening in AI, we need to still do developments in cybersecurity, and yeah, it's something that will always be there. But learning on, when you read on a lot or reviewing the cybersecurity field, there's a lot of developments as well on better tools and better tools on management or preventing cybersecurity attacks. So yeah, and I know there's on various forums, there's a lot of effort going into that. A lot, yeah. And especially completely automated and using AI tools even in cybersecurity that now are really, really good.
Thank you so much. How about Judge? What is your thought on the same?
Yeah, so one is over and above protecting the individual's identity, which is quite important. The other potential risk around cybersecurity, which you need to be cautious of, is a new form of terrorism around cybersecurity. So, for instance, if you can imagine, if people are able to infiltrate, say, the system, and based on the algorithms which you've recommended, either prescribe a certain medicine or make an ingredient into a prescription that can actually be quite fatal to the population. And remember, pharmaceuticals companies are also using this information to continuously monitor drug regimes and also develop new drugs. So if someone say were to be malicious, say a cyber terrorists, they could easily manipulate such algorithms with the intention of biological warfare against a population. So I know currently it's a bit premature, but you've sort of seen the wars that is going on around the West and the East around the current COVID virus. There are allegations it was developed in a lab. That's the sort of biological warfare that you can expect to see if someone was to actually infiltrate into medical records. Then, of course, the other obvious reason is once medical records is a personal affair. So there's always that sort of, I would say, quote unquote, embarrassment that comes around, especially if your medical records are actually exposed to the public.
Okay. Thank you so much. That is informative. I think to George, once again, there's an interesting question here for you. That would you give a general idea of how artificial intelligence can be used for chronic disease risk scores, and prediction of readmissions.
You for chronic disease risk scores and the last bit?
Readmissions, predicting of readmissions.
Yeah, okay, right. So now what you'll find is that across the different types of chronic ailments, there are certain treatment regimes that are employed across different facilities. Now you'll find that based on a patient's clinical symptoms, some treatments are more effective than others. And you'll find that this varies across different risk characteristics of the patient. So for instance, their age, their gender, their geographical location, is it rural or urban? So depending on the outcome of the treatment of the chronic ailments, what AI can enable a clinician to do is to be able to ascertain the most effective treatment against a chronic ailment. Now, because it's probable that again, you may get treated and may need to be readmitted again, based on the preceding treatment that was prescribed prior to readmission, what AI can again enable you to do is to continuously learn and understand which type of treatment is likely to lead to more admission, and also post-treatment follow-up. What type of post-treatment follow-up, and this includes diet, where a particular person resides or recuperates, is most likely to lead to less hospital readmissions.
Maybe within the same line of thought, do you think this then enhances clinical effectiveness and, of course, value-based care and preventative healthcare, because that's the new realm in terms of preventative healthcare? So what would you say about the same?
Yeah, so it's an entire cycle, like you've mentioned. So to begin with, for someone to get a chronic ailment, it could either be genetic or, say, non-communicable, simply meaning it could be as a result of their lifestyle. Now, by understanding what triggered that particular ailment, then you can actually prevent people from getting it in the first place, provided it's not genetic related. And even if it were genetic related, you can be able to understand what can an individual proactively do from a preventive medical healthcare side to actually prevent them from contracting a certain chronic ailment. Then secondly, is also on the treatment bit, which I've already mentioned. So fine, we are not really successful in terms of preventing you from getting that particular ailment. But once you do, what is the medical route that is likely to result in the highest recovery rate and probably lowest fatality rate? So it's a whole cycle which helps everyone across the value chain.
Okay, and then lastly, okay, I think you mentioned everyone, because there was a question on how then it's relatable to a common citizen, especially in Africa or even in our setting in Kenya.
So for a common citizen, regardless where you are, what it will enable you to do is that you'll have the guarantee and satisfaction in knowing that the medical procedure or drugs that are being prescribed to you are those that have the highest chance of ensuring that you recover quickly. And also it's backed by analyzing historical patients' records and data. So it's just the peace of mind knowing that whatever treatment the medical or clinician will prescribe to you is what is going to be the most effective based on your own unique circumstances.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think back to James again. There's a quite interesting question here for you. That James, are you not afraid of machines becoming more intelligent than humans? I think you were to have mentioned that.
These I think these also what these what also I think what all the Hollywood movies portray AI as a scenario where eventually machines will be more intelligent and they realize that the problem in the world is the human beings and they will destroy us all. So these maybe this is actually a possibility. Most of the gurus in this field have considered this as a possibility, and however, this is also dependent on maybe the developers and the intentions. So yeah, like we've said with the gun, the same time you can have someone who will do the same, like they'd use the same tool to kill instead of making peace. So with this, this is a possibility, but there are a lot of laws and rules that are coming up that will actually govern how people develop and use AI tools. In tech, we call this singularity. So yeah, so it's a possible thing, but we don't see it soon. Probably, but we will see.
You think that's the end of the world? Eh?
Yeah, it could be the end of the world, but at the same time, it could be like given a scenario where you have a super intelligence that's managing our agricultural system. So you'd actually have sufficient, you'd have an AI machine that's managing all the farms in the world and how it's produced, what's produced where, probably even the pricing, and like I think with Stephen Hawking before, in a speech before he died, he said that this is something that we should be worried about, because given how population maybe is growing, how will we be able to maintain or make sure that people we are able to feed the whole population? So yeah, I see a world where AI will actually be given full control and we're not worried, because it will probably be making better decisions than some of the leaders that are there. Yeah.
Okay. As we near conclusion, I really hope this was an interactive session. It was an insightful session. I'd like to just welcome George Odera to give his closing remarks with attributes to maybe what do you think is the power of predictive analytics in healthcare, and more specifically, what do you think is the space of AI in data commercialization? George? Okay, fine. Maybe I'll post that to you if you're there. George, are you there? Okay. So closing remarks first from James. James, what is your then a final conclusion on the space or the strength of robotic process automation in predictive analytics, because I know that's key even in healthcare.
Yeah, okay, maybe my closing remarks on that is it's more like an inevitable, the same way more like the wheel came and there were people protesting against the wheel, and we know where we are now with wheels. So this is the same thing with the robotics and AI. It's a tool that's enhancing us or making everything we do much better, and the timelines are reducing, more like lead times. Literally everything, most of the processes are getting much better. So this is something we should embrace, and with a positive mind of making the future better. So yeah. And also I once watched a movie where people were coming from the future, and they were like the field of profession they are from does not even exist today. So this is the same thing I'd say here, that some of the fields that will be there 5 years from now don't even exist today. And I strongly feel they'll be powered by AI. So
thank you so much. George, are you back? Okay. So before I invite Esther Kiringa to move a vote of thanks, I'd like to invite Sarah if she has any closing remarks or any sentiments to our participants and our guests.
Thank you, Dennis, and the guest. It has been a very informative session. I have learned a lot, and I am glad that we were recording the session. So we hope that any materials that can be shared, then we would really appreciate to have them come through, and we'll share with the team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Esther, I'd like to invite you to move a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. That was quite a thought-provoking session. And for me, actually, I'm left with a question. I was very shocked to hear that we only have 1% of robots used in Africa. So I think I have a question for the team, George, James, and John, in terms of the low penetration of robots used in Africa. Is it because we don't have the technical know-how to run this? Or we as Africans, you're very rigid in adoption and embracing of robotics and matters AI, even before I move the vote of thanks?
I think it's something that's slowly maybe going to come, but we have a lot of challenges in Africa. I used to make, or I still make robots, and you're selling robots to a country that still has challenges supplying water, even within Nairobi. So yeah, that's where the first thing so some of the solutions, even like, or the way I think of it is, you just have to solve some of the basic problems within Africa before you even go so complex. Because even those who have the robots are industries such as where it's actually commercially viable, where you're making a lot of money from them, or they are helping you make a lot of money. But seeing applications like you see maybe in developed countries, it will take some time, because yeah, people have priorities. They'll training to buy water, and you're bringing a robot to them. So yeah. The interesting thing is you have robots that have so much application that will help a lot, but they also cost a lot. And the alternative is like you have even maybe just a simple one like in farming. There's a lot of development in farming, but in Kenya we have the alternative of a jembe that doesn't cost you anything, and it works. So yeah, those may be some of the challenges. So we have challenges with resources as well. So yeah, people will go for the old school alternatives first before. But also for those who have taken up the robotics, especially like in industry or in farming, the things they are doing are unbelievable. So yeah, they make the other people look like they're doing nothing. So
Thank you, James, for that. Indeed, it's very interesting, and we're looking forward to a time where we as African, and leading definitely from Kenya, fully adopt use of technology, robots, AI, of course, without replacing the human being in terms of what we are able to do. So I'd like to thank the entire team led by our moderator of the day, Dennis, for having this setup for the webinar today. I know you were at a high of over 90 participants who joined us since 2 o'clock, and we are now almost going to 4. We particularly thank the panelists of James, John, and George Odera for that very thought-provoking discussion in terms of letting us know where we are on matters AI, and especially in the healthcare space. As SMART, we are very keen to see digitization in the healthcare space, not only in Kenya, but across the East African region and the entire African continent through use of data and by automating how various medical access to medical service, medical schemes is managed through an automated process. So I thank the team for your time this afternoon. I thank the entire panelists who are here. I can see we are almost 15 in the panel, 8 in the panel, and a further almost 70 others. So thank you so much for your time. We are running a series of webinars coming after every week on Wednesday or Thursday 2 to 4. So I pass my sincere gratitude to the team that has enabled this webinar, the panelists especially for your time, and also all the participants who have joined us this afternoon. Thank you all. I don't want to take much of the time. We had said it will be from 2 to 4. It's now 4 p.m. So I will allow all of us to leave at our own time. Thank you and have a very good evening.
Thank you so much, Esther.